think we needed to do that for the introductions, but yeah, this one is was a subject that came up as actually we were preparing for the climate finance session, and um, we were talking and looking at some of the data, and Mark asked about opportunity zones, and we were and we took a look at some of the maps that GoBiz provides on their regional data hub there that they maintain, and lo and behold, there were opportunity zones in each of the four counties, plus we're adding Trinity just as a neighborly friend thing in this particular topic. But and in particular with interest around the wind power development, the opportunity zone in the Humboldt Bay at the Smo Peninsula jumped out, and so we had some discussion about that, and then wanted to bring this back as a topic because it is one of the mechanisms, at least that it was intended to do, was to incentivize private investment in under served census tracts. And Mark's going to go into all of these details, but I think what's interesting as we prepared for this one, some of the findings from the trends in opportunity zone investing, particularly in sort of the type of investments that have been attracting the type of projects that have been attracting the investment. And Mark will be able to talk about that, but also the patterns that have developed with regards to urban and rural. And so, there are some good data to look at there. And then also, I think, just with the current political trends, some potential silver linings out there for us on this topic. So with that as an intro preview, I think, Mark, I'd hand the mic over to you, and I think you have a slide deck to share, and then
Yep.
Brian and Mark will be tag teaming.
Okay, let's see. I can press the right button here and screen share. So hold on just a second. Press share. PowerPoint comes up. And we should have a slide that says our opportunity zones are fit for the Redwood region. Is everyone seeing the same thing? Did I press the right button? Let's see. At least
Yeah,
Josh
it looks
has
good,
got it.
Mark. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, first slide. What are opportunity zones? It's an economic development tool. Again, spur economic growth and job creation. It was created in 2017. It expires at the end of next year, but we'll talk about with the Trump administration is expected to very enthusiastically extend this law. So, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I want to go to the next slide and talk about what they really are. They're census tract driven. It's not zip code. It's not any other boundary. It's all by census tracts. There's a definition in the 2017 law of what is a disadvantaged community. And the federal government basically said, we'll give you a income tax subsidy, if you will, for certain types of investments in real estate and businesses in these designated census tracts. To get your full opportunity zone designation, the governors of each of the 50 states have some control, because you have to start with your subset of qualifying on the federal rules census tracts, and then each state governor's got to say within that set of census tracts which ones we think should be turned into opportunity zones and get the tax benefit. So that's how it works. 12% of all census tracts in the US were designated opportunity zones by the federal government. So there's a lot of them. And there are opportunity zones in the four counties of Redwood Region Rise, as well as Trinity counties. Now, we'll have a map on that. We'll show it to you. A lot of it is national forest. So just for the record, but there are some interesting census tracts, particularly in the Humboldt Bay area, that look like they might have some possibilities. Here's the map of north half of the state. This is bigger, obviously, in the Redwood region, but I'm going to cursor around. We've got the Klamath National Forest and the Six Rivers National Forest up here along 299 and Highway 96. I'll get to this. There are opportunity zones in the greater Eureka Arcata area. We have a map coming up. Here we've got, I think Hay Fork is an opportunity zone. I think Weaverville might be. Shasta Lake is an opportunity zone. Um, Dunsmuir, I think, might be in one, but Mount Shasta City is not. So go figure. Uh, then down in Mendocino County, I think Covelo, if I'm pronouncing it right, for the Mendo folks, um, is an opportunity zone. The 101 corridor is not until you get down here, which I think is Hopland and thereabouts. I think this area is in an opportunity zone, which might be a possibility.
I
Let's
think
go to the
that's
next one.
Ukiah Valley area, actually, a little
You
farther
got
up. Yeah,
Ukiah?
yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
Okay. Because I was thinking, oh, yeah, right. The road to Hopland's right here. That might
Yeah,
be Ukiah. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. Yeah.
Hoffman, I believe, is a part of Lake County.
Lake, okay. Well, speaking of Lake County,
We're
we
barely
have,
on the map.
yeah, we've
Oh,
got
there
this
we are.
area in Lake County. I always think of, Clear Lake and Lakeport looking at this don't appear to be in an opportunity zone. We have some mystery rural areas in National Forest on the east side of Clear Lake that
Yeah.
are an opportunity zone. Again, I don't know the background, whether there are other census tracts that would have qualified in California that the governor decided not to include. I don't know if there's any background there or not, but
That
that's
was always a bit of a mystery. I think, this whole thing went down or came out like I think it was around 2017, 2018. And
2018 was the time for the governors to weigh in.
yeah, and during that was when I was most heavily focused in the Monterey
Yeah,
corridor project, and we did end up having a couple census tracts down there that were designated, but it was always a bit of a mystery of how the tracks were designated, and
yeah.
so I think that has persisted. Hopefully there'll be a little more transparency on that process for this, any updates that happen.
So here we have a lot of Humboldt Bay, but portions of Arcata and Eureka are in opportunity zone, and oddly enough, McKinleyville is in there as well. And then if you go far enough east in 299, before you actually get to Willow Creek, you find yourself in an opportunity zone.
Would that also cover Hoopa? I think Hoopa was
We'd
in
have to
that.
go back to the prior slide to get enough in to figure
Yeah,
that one out. So let me see if I can do that.
It is.
Hoopa,
I can
yeah,
okay.
confirm that.
yeah, I thought so. Yeah, so that, I mean, I don't know how that applies
Yeah,
on
that would
on
be like it's the Highway 96 corridor. So yeah, Hoopa and Karuk. Not that Karuk really has land per se, but certainly their population is in there.
So that's a interesting topic, which is sort of the what if any OZ investment has accrued to tribal lands, and I don't know. That's an open question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's because of the questions on how you get enforceable real estate liens on BIA trust jurisdiction land. Uh, I could see that one could be a real challenge,
Oh,
but it can be
interesting.
managed. I know it has been managed. But let's go to the next slide. And this is also, I'm going to ask that Brian weigh in on these things. Because Brian and I are going to tag team it. I'm going to kind of cover the basic facts, and Brian can give more of the background because he's been involved in some of the background stuff for years. But we'll start with what's the federal subsidy. It's essentially a write-off of capital gains tax. And the way it works, the federal capital gains tax is 25% of your capital gains. And so this really it applies to real estate. let's assume that you build an apartment building for $2 million and you own it for 10 years and you sell it for $3 million. So your capital gain would be, three subtract less two would be $1 million. You would normally owe $250,000 in taxes to the US government. Okay, 25% of 1 million. Well, if you stayed in for 10 years and you're in an opportunity zone, you owe nothing. You just got a $250,000 tax benefit, cash and fist. So that is what the magic is. And the law is more complex than this as it was originally written. Um, the more complicated benefits have expired. So that what's sitting here left is that stay in it for 10 years and you get your full capital gains liability written off. There were provisions that if you had shorter investment stays, that I should say shorter as opposed to shorten, but at any rate, you get a partial. You don't get your full 25% write-off. You get a partial write-off. Those write-downs the partial write-downs have expired. Again, the Trump administration is expected to extend the deadline and also restore the partial write-downs and maybe even expand the scope of the law. So we'll talk about that as well. Brian, things to add.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think you did a great job summarizing the benefits of the federal tax subsidy. As Mark mentioned, the partial write-off tax advantage has already expired. It would have offered investors, or did offer investors, a 10% reduction in their capital gains tax liability if they kept the investment in a qualified opportunity fund for 5 years. And then they could have gotten a 15% reduction in their tax liability if they would have kept their investment in a qualified opportunity fund for 7 years. And so because the deadline for the program expires under the current law expires December 31st, 2026, you would have had to invest or roll over your capital gains into a qualified opportunity fund by 2021 and 2019, respectively, to take advantage of those tax benefits. As Mark mentioned, there's a lot of optimism and giddiness in the opportunity zone industry. However, that the opportunity zone program will be extended and renewed with the incoming Republican presidential administration, as well as Republican control of both chambers of Congress. And so one of the proposed provisions in the updated tax legislation that would renew the Opportunity Zone program is an extension of the deadline from December 31st, 2026 to December 31st, 2028. So essentially giving 2 more years of tax deferment and investment opportunity to qualified opportunity zone investors. And then as Mark mentioned, there is a potential for the partial write-off provisions to be included as well. And so a lot of interest and excitement in the opportunity zone community about the prospect of this program being extended and renewed. It's a good opportunity for communities to take advantage of this. And in fact, there's also legislation that was introduced the year before last that would provide additional benefits and expand the program to include additional rural census tracts. And so I can talk more about that later on in the presentation, but needless to say, there is a lot of giddiness and optimism about the revitalization of the Opportunity Zone program moving forward into the future.
Great, thank you, Brian. So where is the money going? Now we're getting into the, I'll call it the public policy controversial part of this thing. There's a lot of interesting debate and analysis saying the opportunity zones are not really accomplishing much. And I'm not going to comment on that, but I want to certainly, in spirit of full disclosure, say that this is from a public policy standpoint. There are arguments on both sides of this. This may not be worth it. So, take that in. And if you want to Google that, and then Brian's got some slides that have some more information, you can get in the middle of that debate really fast and get really well informed. Lots of material on it. But 2/3 of the money is flowing into real estate as opposed to businesses. And that's one of the things they thought, well, we're going to, go in these disadvantaged communities, we're going to get all these business startups and new jobs in the disadvantaged community and so forth. No, it's going into real estate. And that's for something that the people on this call, I recommend, if you do want to consider something here, you got to think about it's a real estate investment. And what do you have in the world of new real estate that you want in your community that might be helped by this? Then it gets even more tight. I should add there is not highly granular public information on this because tax information is like medical information in terms of privacy in our country. And you aren't supposed to reveal people's tax things and all of that. So getting actually good data on where the ozone money is going is challenging, but there's been people and organizations that I think have done a fairly good job. The guess is around 3/4 of the real estate money is going in the market rate multifamily. So, there you have it, team. Your most likely ozone deal that you could do in your communities is likely to be a market rate multifamily rental project. And notice I said market rate and not affordable. There is some affordable housing being done, but not nearly as much as I'll call it the public policy wonks would like to see being done. So think about that way for starters. It's, you're basically market rate apartment units. Is that something you want in your community? Now, here's another one that's a big public policy issue. 95% of all ozone investments are made in urban zones. One of the most successful qualified opportunity fund investors in California is called Urban Catalyst. Where are they based? Silicon Valley. Hey, wow, they have ozones in Silicon Valley. What a deal. They're doing great. Does Silicon Valley need it? That's debatable. 1% of the opportunity zones have received 42% of the investments. This is really focused. We do not know whether any ozone in the Redwood region, including Trinity County, has received a dime since 2018. We do not know. But if there is a ozone that's gotten an investment, it's probably a one-off. The rural areas are not seeing the money. This goes back to what Brian was saying. There is legislation introduced by a Republican congressperson from Georgia that would, say, yeah, we're going to expand and, reauthorize ozone, but the benefits are going to go to rural areas. We want to see money go into rural areas. And this is the case where people on this call might not normally think you're aligned with a elected Republican from Georgia, but in this particular case, you may find yourself aligned that the rural areas need some benefit here and they are not getting it. Who are the investors? Basically, why individuals can do ozones in reality is through what they call a qualified opportunity zone fund. Basically, it's a cross between a mutual fund and a partnership. And it's, just think about it as, again, as a really as a mutual fund for tax benefits investments. What this means, though, it gets really interesting. The many of these funds, if you will, have their own staff or are partnered with land developers. They're basically, there is a gray area between a land developer and an ozone fund where they are, even if they're technically separate corporations, they tend to be one and the same when you're doing a business deal with them. They work together because, again, this is about bringing a new land development out of the ground. The businesses are largely being ignored. It's about real estate development. And so developers love them, and ozone investors like successful developers. So what this, let me finish the last bullet, then I'll go into what this means, I think, for people on the call, is that these partnerships, if you will, of a ozone fund and a developer are focused on particular types of real estate development. For example, the developer is experienced in doing the land developer part, and on specific regions where they feel that type of land development, that project type, is going to work. So what this means, if you're on the public sector or the NGO side, the de facto try to find a pathway to success here, you've got to find a ozone land developer combination that is focused on a type of real estate project that you want and is willing to take a shot at it in your region. And so, yeah, no surprise, doing self-storage in San Jose through an ozone is like, oh, wow, that's a no-brainer. You can get all kinds of people to do that one. Getting them to come in and do a project that the Redwood region public sector NGOs want is a completely different category. So I'm sounding negative, but you saw the statistics. Let's correctly size up what our challenge here is. Brian, this would be a great time for you to weigh in because you've been trying to get ozone investment into needy parts of California for a while. So what's the story you see?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Mark, one of the biggest challenges with the Opportunity Zone program is that the investors want to get the biggest return on their investment. And so that's why a lot of the equity funding is being allocated or directed towards urban centers with high growth potential, making it difficult for more rural and economically distressed areas to attract capital. And so hopefully going forward with the reenactment of this legislation and the emphasis on providing benefits, specific benefits to rural areas, there will be an opportunity for rural regions to attract more Opportunity Zone capital. The one thing I will add is that, one of the things that Opportunity Zone investors look for in investment in a region is reduce risk and also reduce upfront costs. And so if you can highlight that your region has, or highlight that specific area of a region has high potential for growth, that's a great way at attracting Opportunity Zone investors. And I'm thinking more in particular, if I'm correct, there's a EIFD form in the Samoa Peninsula area that can be used as an example of how the area, how the region is making investments into improvements in infrastructure and public facilities, and that might encourage Opportunity Zone investors to take a better look at the Redwood region, Humboldt County, and might alleviate some of their concerns about not receiving a return on their investment. And so, again, even though previous previous industry trends show that opportunity zone equity has historically been directed towards urban centers and market rate residential development. I do think there is potential going forward for more rural areas and other development sectors, other types of development projects to attract opportunity zone capital going forward in the future.
If I might just add a couple comments as well there, Mark, I think the Samoa Peninsula example is a good one. That's a move that was taken, a couple of years ago, setting up this EIFD and laying the foundation for, the public investments and all of that. So it demonstrates the community's interest in seeing things happen there. And, I think from the standpoint of the question of industrial, investment versus market rate housing, I think that's a good one. But I know from my earlier involvement with this whole question and in fact a project that ended up happening in Monterey, the companies making a not primarily OZ benefit driven investment decision did take into account the tax benefits that the opportunity zone would provide the company for what ended up being a larger manufacturing facility. So like, let's say there are facilities like that would be needed to support the wind power work, especially with companies that have existing revenue and existing tax liability. This could be an attractant, and so I think that just thinking about the layers, whether it's the stack, if you will, different kind of a stack. This is more like a policy and tax credit stack, but I think it presents an interesting opportunity, and also speaks to the importance of like intentionality and strategic positioning if indeed these kind of tools are going to come into play on the North Coast, especially in rural areas and the North Coast in particular. So I just think it's worth noting for this group.
Well, and thank you, Josh. I also noticed that David put in the chat that South Arcata was a qualified census tract, but didn't make the final cut with the governor's office, apparently, which I'm sure there's a whole story behind that. The notion that's circulating in the giddy opportunity zone investor world is that the census tract governor, I'll call it the gubernatorial vetoes that took place in 2018, get to be revisited if the law gets renewed. So there may be hope for South Arcata and any other census tract in our region here that got shot down.
Yeah,
So,
to add to that, one of the provisions in the new congressional legislation would redesignate certain census tracts. In particular, it would remove the opportunity zone designation for census tracts that are more high wealth, and the proposal or the provision promotes that for every census tract that is removed, every state can nominate a new census tract to replace it. So yeah, there will be opportunity to nominate census tracts in the future, very likely.
well, that's good news here. Thank you, Brian. Next slide. Okay, I'll press the right button. Okay. Sorry for making you seasick. Yes, our next slide. So how can we capture this subsidy? And again, full disclosure, maybe we don't want to capture this subsidy. Maybe it's not good public policy, but that's not for me to weigh in on. It's for the people, listeners on this call to decide for themselves on a well-informed decision. So looking at the stats, it's delivering a new real estate investment that's a happy medium between what our public sector NGO community in the region would like and what opportunity zone investors want. Here's an example. Is market rate multifamily a suitable compromise? Or is it, look, if it's not affordable multifamily, we don't want to get involved with it? That's a fair question. I'm using that as an example of, I think, the internal dialogue that the people on this call and anybody else who downloads the recording need to be considering is what might you want? Tina mentioned healthcare. I'm looking at like, okay, medical offices, assisted living, um, skilled nursing, all those things. Are those projects that are appealing to the public NGO sector in the region? If they are, then the question becomes, can you find an ozone fund partner that is experienced and committed to doing projects like that in your region? I have no idea, but that's the question that would land on the table. And then again, the invitation is for people on this call to consider whether you've got a type of real estate project in the region that you really want. And it's in an ozone potentially. And then, as Josh mentioned, other commercial and industrial real estate opportunities. The wind farm, offshore wind is one. There is a key characteristic of census tracts that creates an opportunity, maybe not in the Redwood region, but I'll tell you it does in the Bay Area. State boundaries, cities, and all of that do not go into the water. Census tracts do. So you'll find out that, as we showed in that map, a lot of Humboldt Bay is in an ozone. The water, the bay itself is in an ozone. A lot of San Francisco Bay is in an ozone. So we are looking at an example of creative, hopefully not totally delusional thinking, of building a lot more housing here and dealing with sea level rise. Can we basically entitle water, basically do Sausalito houseboats on steroids, and use ozones to fund it? That question is on the table. It's a fair question. And I look at Humboldt Bay, and certainly the whole logistics of getting these giant windmills out into the ocean means that I think it's a positive thing that portions of Humboldt Bay are in the ozone. So I invite people to think about that. None of Clear Lake, at least from the map, is in a census tract that was in an ozone. So that one doesn't work. Crescent City is got an ozone. I don't know if how much of that ozone goes into the bay at Crescent City. How can we attract the investors? And the message, number one message, I was a redevelopment person for, God, going back to the 1980s. And so I spent a lot of time doing redevelopment. We would work with redevelopment agencies, with developers and private sector parties on a case-by-case basis. We would not, as a rule of thumb, do long-term partnerships with one particular developer to do the whole project area. The case-by-case approach, which has typically been used in the public sector for public-private partnership and with NGOs for years, in my opinion, is not a good place to start with ozones. You need to find a partner who's got an alignment with what you want to do, if you can find such a partner, and do a long-term partnership. Which is leading to, well, I'm jumping ahead to a next step. It's like, I think if there is any interest in doing this with this community on this call or listening to it later, you need to know what you want in terms of real estate, and you need to know where you want it to be. Then you need to go out and find and see if there is a combination of again, the land developer and the funds tend to go together, a combo that you're willing to work with and live with for the long term. And then another question besides knowing what you want is, what do you have to offer? And what I'm looking at is, well, obviously for California, you've got relatively low cost land. Again, for California, you're a candidate for having the most reliable long-term water supply. And most developers don't seem to care about that. However, I can speak from experience because of climate change. There are a growing number of developers who are concerned about long-term water supply. And just maybe, there's someone out there who doesn't want to turn, like, Mount Shasta's headwaters of Sacramento into Nestle's, mineral water marketing effort or whatever, who you could offer that to. But the most controversial is the willingness to grant entitlements for real estate developments that meet certain conditions. In the more active development parts of the state, let's take the Inland Empire, for example, it's called development agreements. They do them all the time. And you enter into a long-term agreement with the developer to do a master plan community. And there's conditions saying, hey, we're going to give you the entitlements. We aren't going to take them away. We can't take them away, but you have to meet certain conditions. Redevelopment agencies had that power too. And we've lost a lot of our power to do P3 on that last piece. And honestly, that's controversial. Do you want to be involved in granting some developer ozone fund combination law, special entitlements or whatever? I have no idea. But that's one of the three things I can think of that you can offer. That's one of the key ones. And I'm not suggesting or even recommending, let alone recommending that you do that. But that's something they are likely to ask for. Next steps. Yes, we're going to the end of the slide deck here, and I know Brian will have more things to add. But this is what I was leading up to. Should the Redwood region, what is it? All right. Okay. There we go. Okay. Excuse me while I have a
You're good. Just hit the
typo pressing the
slideshow.
wrong button and I can't seem to
There
get
you
it
go.
back.
You're
There
good.
we go. Okay. Should the Redwood region survey potential ozone investors for a potential partnership? I do think if you want to go ahead, that is the question you got to deal with. Not in addition to figuring out what it is that the Redwood region really wants to see in real estate development. If you take those steps, then the next one is, what can we do with this 25 congressional effort to extend and expand ozones? Can we get a benefit for the Redwood region in doing that? And, can we get special benefits for rural areas? There's a bill by the congressperson in Georgia to give extra tax benefits for rural areas. Can you get the governor or the federal government to revisit what are eligible rural ozones in the Redwood region? Those questions all go on the table. And should you, consider doing an intervention at the congressional level in your region? So this is and also if you're looking at this, as I mentioned, the congressperson in Georgia, are you going to be collaborating with other rural areas in California or nationally to do this? So I'm not leaving you with any answers. I'm leaving you with a bunch of questions. We're ending the presentation, but I know Brian has a lot of things to add. And I also know, I'm hoping you guys have a lot of questions for us.
Yeah,
Brian.
thanks, Mark. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I actually only have a couple slides here. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Coming up. There you go. Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, let me full screen this. Great. So yeah, just wanted to end the presentation. Mark did such a wonderful job providing a overview of the Opportunity Zone program. but wanted to share these lists of resources that I've compiled that I typically share with external partners who have inquiries about the program. So all these are hyperlinks. I won't click on them right now because it will probably screw up my Zoom screen. But
but this deck will be bundled
yes.
with Mark's and posted on the website after, so you can get to these links that Brian has here.
Correct. So the first two links are well, the first link is a link to our community and place-based solutions website that we put together with information about opportunity zones, and then the second link is the IRS website with a comprehensive amount of information on opportunity zones, and then the third link is a map of California opportunity zones from our place-based data tool that Josh mentioned earlier. I've included a link that takes you directly to the auto-populated interactive map that shows opportunity zones. And so when you click on it, it will the areas in purple will be opportunity zone areas. And I will also add to that, apart from showing opportunity zones, our place-based data tool is really valuable. It shows, it has other socioeconomic and business data as well that you might find extremely valuable. And then I've also included a list of all the OC census tracts across the nation, broken down by state and county, that was published on the IRS website. So if you're looking for a specific looking to see if a specific census tract is in an opportunity zone area, you can refer to this. And then I included a few links at the bottom to third-party websites that provide very valuable information on opportunity zones. So the first one is a link to opportunityzones.com, really valuable resource on opportunity zone information. And this particular link takes you to a web page that shows a list of just the California Opportunity Zone census tracts. I think it contains additional information on socioeconomic data in those census tracts, which is really valuable, and also includes a list of some opportunity zone funds. So these are the qualified opportunity funds that Mark mentioned that are looking to attract or collect capital from investors. And as Mark mentioned, this is not a comprehensive list because when it comes to tax issues, that information is provided voluntarily. So these are opportunity zone funds that voluntarily provided their information on this site. The link below this is another third-party website, Novogradic, which has a lot of useful information on opportunity zones. And this specific link takes you to a list of additional opportunity zone funds that are looking to collect investment and equity from investors. And then the last link is just a guidebook, a little beginner's guidebook that provides a overview and summary of the opportunity zone program published by opportunityzones.com, which was formerly known as Opportunity DB or Opportunity Database. So yeah, I'm happy to share this link in the slide with Mark's, and it will include hyperlinks directly to those web pages. And then just my contact information, if anyone has any additional questions or wants to learn more about opportunity zones, happy to connect with any member of the public or any external partner.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so that information will be shared and go up on the website. And but I think, Mark and Brian raised some good points. What I kind of took away from that was the importance of, again, some regional thinking and acting, if indeed this is a mechanism that people want to see come to be used in the North Coast. I think there's a big hill to climb in the urban rural data gap that we see there with most of the investment going to urban areas. There is an opportunity with this new administration and new policy. It would have to be something that, there was intentionality put towards, but it seems to be a subject that comes up in our work here in this group frequently, which is, the opportunity and challenge of being distributed rural area and the importance of coordination and working together to have an impact, at a larger scale. So those are some of my takeaways. I don't know, were there other points or questions that you all had that we could get more into?
What I was thinking, and I don't know how useful it will be, but once we get our hands on the actual projects that are submitted, it's one of the things we can kind of look through is if there is a actual physical facility involved with it. We're doing pre-development now, but it could be kind of a long-term strategy if somebody happens to be near or looking for a place. Maybe we could think and help direct them that way. But it's still going to be really difficult. I like the idea of trying to get more rural opportunity zones because it just has not been practical for us yet. So
Yeah, and I did do a little research into the question of opportunity zone investment on tribal lands, and I put a link that I came across. It was from the early days of the program from the BIA, and it doesn't appear that there is any real records of OZ investments accruing to tribal lands that I was able to discover. And so it seems like that would be another one of these sort of hills to climb, but opportunities at the same time. It's like, Hoopa is, squarely in that big one out east, Humboldt, and Covelo, has all the tribes up there that were forced up there. And so it seems like that could be an area, it's one of the unique characteristics of the Redwood region is the abundance of tribes, and maybe there's some work to be done there.
Well, that was going to be my question. I'm still trying to get the big picture of like, with this 25% credit, what does that look like? In other words, the money comes in and because we've done new market tax credits. You mentioned tribal stuff. I mean, we've done a couple BIA loans, and we're doing something up in coming up in Hoopa, and it's pretty big, and we're going to get our usual outside CDFIs to kick in mission-related money. But something like this could be a game changer. We also have another larger project. It's in McKinleyville, but I'm not sure. I got to look at the map, see if it fits. So there's some bigger stuff that is actually happening. I just don't know if it fits the box because you talked about tribal land, in trust land. Does that work or not work?
Well, I think, Ross, you're asking a great question. I mean, basically, one of the first things is that you really don't get the tax credit. You don't get it cash in fist until you sell, and you have to go pay your capital gains. So it's 10 years out. I use my example. You built it for 2 million, you sold it for 3 million after 10 years, and you basically get $250,000 off of that. 25% of the $1 million capital gains. It went from 2 million to 3 million. Your basis was 2 million. You sold it at 3.
Okay, so it really is, because what we're doing is just doubling the size of a medical center, but that's not what you want. Then they need to sell it then.
Right.
They
Well, this is
they
very
need
specialized.
they need to sell it. Now there's ways around that too, apparently. Tax law, as everybody in this call knows, can be a rabbit hole. We can go down that rabbit hole for hours. And neither, even though Brian, I think, knows a hell of a lot more than I do, neither Brian and I think, really want to go into weeds on tax law on this one, but we can certainly bring people to the table who might be able to answer that question. I think
No,
the issue, I've just going back to tribal lands, I was the municipal advisor to the Navajo Nation in days of yore. And so I learned a whole lot about financing things on BIA trust jurisdiction. And the good news, Navajo Nation had its own court system and was very efficient in enforcing remedies on real estate deals and everything else. The bad news is that, you know, they're the largest indigenous government in the Western Hemisphere, and not everybody, all the other indigenous governments have court systems like Navajo. Uh, and so what you have to do is go through a lengthy process of getting the tribe to waive its basically legal authority over remedies on a real estate deal so that you can go into federal court and not tribal court to enforce a lien or whatever on tribal land. And I used to know that process well, but that was a long time ago. But to the best of my knowledge, it has not changed significantly in the last 30 years. And so on Hoopa, which or out in Covelo, it's a matter of, I believe, of going through this transferring of the enforcement of remedies from the tribal jurisdiction to the federal courts.
So this is Walter, just a little bit, a couple of comments that I have. I don't understand really the opportunity itself, but just trying to, you know, think outside of the box a little bit. Maybe if we're talking about a market driven multifamily housing development, for instance, a couple hundred apartments or something like that, maybe the tribe becomes the purchaser of that at the time when the deal is set to sunset or something like that. And what you're talking about is done all the time. Limited waiver of sovereign immunity to give up the tribe's sovereignty with regard only to those agreements, and that's done every day. So maybe nowadays it's done probably too often, but it really is sort of the rule of the day with regard to investment, because people want to protect their money and they don't want to have any threat of being sort of cannibalized by the power of the tribes, if you will. And that's, we have our own tribal court as well. So, you know, it happens, but I'm just trying to think why this would happen at Hoopa. I also thought about the 65,000 square foot manufacturing facility that we have there, and potentially maybe re-upping that as something other than what it was designed for, you know, with regard to the offshore wind opportunity. But maybe it's just pier blocks. You know, we have a concrete manufacturing facility there next to that manufacturing facility, and we also have a small mill. So maybe we just do pier blocks and sell it into Home Depot or something over and over again. I don't know how that would fit under this sort of scenario, but it just has my wheels spinning anyway, and just wanted to sort of chime in and give some.
Oh, thank you, Walter. Yeah, you gave me the words I was missing. So, and I'm glad the waiver of sovereign immunity has probably gotten a lot more efficient than it was in days of yore.
And I was going to talk to Walter about this anyway, because there's all kinds of different options, other kinds of financing options. And so what we've done actually with Hoopa before on the grocery store, because that is on sovereign land, but because of the BIA guarantee and what we did with them, I'm just shortening it down. It makes more sense on a project like that or anything on tribal land. After listening to this, it's probably be easier for us to get our mission related investors kicking in their money, because they'll give it to us at below market rate a little bit. Or sometimes we can do it that way. Or I use two other CDFIs from the state out of San Francisco and Sacramento that give us a decent rate. So yeah, we don't get tax credits, but we can get lower than we have options. So I was thinking also that there is something we've got going. It just has to be an opportunity zone. It's pretty big, and they might use it for something else. So I don't want to mention that one yet. Yeah. But also, every once in a while, I looked downtown where we get a whole block, and then we start layering housing, affordable, you know, below market rate housing and all that, with some retail on the first floor, and those are bigger projects. However, tell me if I'm wrong, but looking at this one, because we've done new markets and historic with outside It's a lot of work, but this one looks like even like extra work. I could tell that there's very special people who want their tax credits and they want
Yeah.
it to be really big and I don't know. It's in my head. I'm like Walter, it's spinning around and I always look, we've found some really neat products and stuff that's worked for us. This one seems even more special than Newmarket and his tax credits to me, a little harder. What I mean is, I haven't seen a lot of rural here. When we did the open door clinic years ago in Eureka, that ended up with Newmarket tax credit, but I understood that because we're in a rural area, it's a medical center, and they were lining up with their tax credits for that because there's a 20% set aside for rural, and you get bonus points, whatever that means for medical. That I understand. This is a little tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little, Ross, just my own experience with this. You know, there's definitely a complex process by which all the dollars have to flow, including the establishment of these opportunity zone funds, which are sort of the mechanisms that the vehicles that actually make the investments. It's not like an individual investor just takes his money and throws it down. So you know, the marketplace, like there is an industry that grew up in response to the creation of this law that still exists. And you know, the big movers are folks who have put together these funds to make investments in places like downtown San Jose. In fact, I have a colleague who's you know, they became an investor in a fund, and then there's a group that manages the fund according to, you know, the policy. So what you know, was uncovered just in our discussions in preparation for this session, which to me was pretty interesting, and you know, maybe the new market tax credit example with the 20% rural set aside is maybe a precedent, but you know, if that there hasn't been much deployment of opportunity zone funds in rural areas. And so while downtown Eureka relative to the surrounding landscape is not rural, I think that the county as a whole and the region as a whole obviously is. So there you would either have to find an investor, an opportunity zone fund with interest, particular interest in the product or the deal type that you have, or maybe some mission, and I haven't learned or seen many of these mission aligned, like sort of impact investor opportunity funds, but something like that. And then you know, the question of, you know, could there be an amendment to this law that creates a more greater incentive to do these rural investments? But the one thing that I think, you know, Mark called out, which is, you know, a proactive approach to finding opportunity zone investors that may be interested in either the set of options that are available on the Redwood Coast, or that could be put together from Redwood Coast interested investors to begin with. That, like, you know, I know there's the guys like with Lost Coast Ventures that are, you know, they've set up a particular interest in venture capital investment on the North Coast. There could be something like that that's, you know, created like a Redwood Rise OZ fund from people who somehow have some impact investment interest, you know, as a way to sort of focus the thing. All of that's speculative, but I think it's, you know, the kind of thinking that would need to and acting that would need to happen to really see this come down to the ground and affect some of these projects.
I have some thoughts. With this Redwood Region Rise initiative and the work that we're doing to evaluate projects, are we going to have some kind of ROI on these projects so that we could do a sales pitch kind of similar to what Susan was saying? Hey, we have, you know, a compilation of different community projects that you can invest in, and here's your projected ROI in 5 years from now if you were to develop this business or develop this housing, or here's your ROI 10 years from now. And then you know, what kind of information do we have on the historical growth? You know, I bought a home here 10 years ago, and now it's probably worth twice as much as what it is. You know, do we have that regional information to show what the historical property value growth has been in our area as a pitch to sell to these prospective investors?
I like that idea, Tina, as I think, again, the notion is putting together a package of some kind, as Susan was talking about, and then going out and seeing if there is an ozone fund that has an interest in that package in your region. You know, that was if I actually, you know, for Brian's benefit, I talked to Urban Catalyst from our last meeting, and they agreed that was the way to do it, is to put together what you really want, kind of where you want to do it, and go find out if there's a fund that would have that aligns with what you want to do.
Yeah.
But again, just it starts with knowing what you want for this group. What do you really want?
That's the purpose of this whole thing, is the good news, is to, get down into a concise set of things, a good, you know, uh, suite of projects, a menu, and then, maybe that's just kind of a good concept to have in mind, is like, then it's going out and proactively hunting and like doing pitching people on, hey, this is why. And whether it's you're pitching the private sector for the opportunity zone, or you're pitching the public sector for different grants, at least you have your deck together, you have your pitch, and you can go for it. I see Calder's patiently waiting there.
Oh, hey, yeah. So yeah, I was just thinking about what Tina, what you just mentioned about the way property values have gone. And I was also considering like the question of like, yes, like trying to spur private investment. And I was also reminded of the press release from McGuire's office and Riva's office I was reading through in the North Coast Journal today. And part of the challenge, like one of the things that they were talking about at great length, was the need to address affordability of housing amongst just affordability of real estate in general in California. And it does raise some interesting, I don't necessarily think like antagonistic like dualities, but like a polarity between trying to trying to normalize prices versus trying to attract, say, private investment that is looking for values to go up. They mean that's what they want to see happen. So I don't necessarily think that that's a non-starter, but it does sort of complicate the sales pitch, so to speak.
Yeah, you're right. I guess the concept there is the rising tide rises all boats, but we know maybe that doesn't quite work.
Yeah, I haven't
All the
actually
time.
found that many venture capitalists that really believe that, but maybe there are some of them out there for sure. We should find them.
Well, this is the complex landscape we're in. I think we have to be able to, you know, have, navigate all of that skillfully. So, any other questions or comments for discussion? Okay, well, seeing none, I told Mark and Brian that I didn't think anyone would argue with getting a few minutes back at the end of their day. So with the recording we will certainly post this along with the decks and add this to our body of knowledge for the benefit of us and our networks. And I guess as we move closer and closer to having that set of projects, then to look at and decide what to do with, we'll be well armed with some good information to work with. So with that, I'd say Susan or anyone else, Mark, do you have any closing comments?
Just appreciate the opportunity to connect people in the Redwood region in the North Coast, and love the area. And Yeah, we'd love to work with you if that really becomes an opportunity to do some economic development funding. So we're here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming and doing 2 of these for us. That's been great. And I do think that when we're talking about the projects, that the projects that might potentially get catalyst funding, and the projects that won't get catalyst funding, they're all things that we can consider, and this could be a good use of economic development finance working group knowledge to sort of think about how to pursue with this. So.
Yeah, and I see that we've successfully piqued David's interest. So David, I hope this is not the last time we see you in this working group. First, a person with your expertise will be valuable for everyone to be able to know more about. And so I did put a link in the chat to the working group web page where most of the videos and everything are stored, and this one will be uploaded within the week. And love to hear more from you if there are topics. Also, we're sort of putting together, we do it somewhat opportunistically, but we're aiming for strategically topics for the year ahead. And we do these, our intention is to do these expert sessions pretty much monthly. Usually we take 1 or 2 months in the year off, I think. But if there are topics that, are on your radar that you think would be interesting to hear from, or expert speakers that come across your radar, we'd love to hear about those and consider bringing them forward.
Thank you.
And that's just generally open to, of course, anyone in the group. But since David made it tonight, I said, hey, give you a special nod.
And when you go to that
Appreciate that,
page to check this out, you'll be able to see all the other topics we hit, like new market tax credits and TIFs and those things.
Etc. So I guess this is this our last convening before the year's end, yes, okay.
This is December. So
Okay. Well, it's been a real pleasure working with all of you. And we look forward to that continuing in the new year. And wish you all the best over the next little chunk of holidays. And we'll look forward to seeing everyone again in January, if not before.
happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey,